Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Simple Diversion. My name is Graham.
And my name is Rob.
And Rob, today we have a special guest with us from one of our favorite distilleries around, Rabbit Hole. It is Adam Edwards, the digital brand ambassador. So kind of him to join us tonight, hang out with us a little bit. Thanks again, Adam, for being here. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I really love the channel, and anytime I have a chance to drink bourbon and talk about it for a living, I'm down. So let's do it.
Awesome. If I'm looking this way, I do apologize. I got my camera here, so I'm trying to look in the camera, but look at you guys as well. So we'll just have to deal with it. It's all good. So Adam, tell us a little bit about yourself, just to kind of start things off. So anybody that's maybe not familiar with you or just Rabbit Hole in general, maybe they can learn a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I'm from Louisville. I grew up here. I actually live over in southern Indiana now. I met a girl from Indiana, and she drugged me over there. But I always like to tell people I have the best view of Louisville. So
Sure.
I've worked for Rabbit Hole I've been with the company for about 2.5 years. So pretty much right when the distillery opened to the public, I came on as a tour guide. But I've been in the industry for about 15 years. Started as a wine guy, was studying to be a wine sommelier back in the mid-2000s, but being from Louisville, I'm going to be a bourbon drinker, of course. American whiskey is my jam. So it's pretty easy to relate the skills from my wine past into my whiskey present. A lot of that kind of bleeds over. I went to the University of Kentucky, and I don't know, that's about it. It's all Kentucky and bourbon for me, all the way.
So what is your role exactly? What do you get to do with Rabbit Hole?
Man, I am a really lucky guy. So,
hang out with us.
For as long, you know what I mean? Look at this is a real backdrop. This is not one of the digital Zoom backdrops, But yeah, I'm really lucky. I've just had this dream for I really got into bourbon in the mid 2000s. After I really got into wine, I kind of got tired of wine pretty quick and moved into bourbon. And I immediately just fell in love with going to distilleries. Before the bubble even happened, I was going to tour distilleries and just really love the feeling that you have in a distillery, right? I love bourbon, of course, but I'm not a chemistry guy. And so the whole production side of bourbon is just magic to me. And so it really captured me, and I developed this great passion for the industry, not just the drink, but the industry. And so I always had this really great, dream to be an ambassador. So I actually started with Rabbit Hole, like I said, about 2.5 years ago. I started as a tour guide. I was running the tour department. And then once, 2020 happened and everything changed, hospitality became a different animal. And we closed the distillery. I think we closed the distillery to the public. I think it was March 16th, something like that. Mm-hmm. And so, the chief marketing officer, the number 2 hire of Rabbit Hole, a great guy named Michael Comedy. Michael looked at me and he said, you told me once that you always wanted to be an ambassador. He was like, I love the way that you talk about the brand. You obviously have such passion for American whiskey, Kentucky bourbon, and Rabbit Hole. He was like, let's make it happen. Let's get you to that ambassador role. He was like, but we're going to do it really, really differently. He's like, let's start talking about a digital brand ambassador. And so basically about 99% of my life is lived looking into a screen, and really connecting with people that way. And what I can really say is that once things get back to normal, just the big air quotes normal, this isn't going away. This whole digital side to the industry has been opened. That door has been opened. That door is not going to be very easily shut, I don't think. I think more and more people are really loving the idea that they may live in Tacoma, Washington, or Toronto, or Buenos Aires, or whatever, and they can experience something like a Kentucky bourbon distillery just through the power of their technology. And so that's really what I do. I connect with people like you. I connect consumer side. I connect retailer and trade side. I help, I started this whole private virtual tasting package that we do at Rabbit Hole, which has been wildly successful. I mean, incredibly successful. And it's really just about connecting with people. If you all can already tell, I'm a big people person, and I really hate that the distillery is closed because I love when people are around. But this is like just as good. I really get to connect with so many people all day long and just talk about bourbon. And that's, I'm just a lucky guy. What can I say?
Well, I know Rob and I have really talked about in the last few years of going to Kentucky and doing the Bourbon Trail, at least going for like a long weekend. Definitely we saw that Rabbit Hole was building that new distillery, and that was definitely something that we, kind of marked on our map too. Like, we got to get here. This is one of our favorites. Rob is the one that got me on Rabbit Hole. And how did you find that bottle, Rob? What made you want to get that bottle?
Well, my wife told me that I could spend a certain amount of money, and I decided to spend $10 more because the bottle looked really cool, and that worked out. So we popped it open and ended up just really liking it. It was different than everything else that I tasted, especially at that time. And just every time we do like a bourbon blind tasting or something, Rabbit Hole is always up there for us in like the top 3, and it's great bourbon. I love it. I've been a fan ever since I got it, and just kind of rooting for you guys over there, so.
We appreciate that.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. We love the support.
I think Rabbit Hole really does a great job to it, really presenting a high-end product. Like, you look at the bottle, it's unique. It stands out on its own. The color schemes that you guys have gone with, I think, go well together, just with the gold of the liquid plus the colors you're picking for the labels.
Yeah.
Just that, the sleek bottle just really stands out to me. It's always been something that is eye-catching, and obviously it got Rob's attention and got us to try it. And now here we are, big fans.
Nothing looks like this,
Right.
I mean, that was the whole point. Cave really didn't want to ever do anything that was white noise, right? If you ever make it to the distillery, when you walk in the main hallway, you'll see this room called the Sensory Lab, where the Sensory team meets and taste through barrels and new products, old products, current products. Terrible job. And in that room, there's a couple of shelves that are filled with bottles, and they're not ours. I mean, they're other people in the industry, not even the bourbon industry. I mean, there's rum bottles in there and sherry bottles and stuff like that. And I think, that really just helps remind us that there's so much out there, and that we've always got to, be innovative. We've always got to be distinct. Those are 2 huge core values for Rabbit Hole, because there's no reason. I mean, let's put it this way. Cave could have very easily sourced, a bunch of high rye bourbon from somebody, slapped a label on it, made a few $1 million and walked away. But there's no legacy in that. There's no fun in that. There's no innovation in that. It's just boring. And you can see this hat I'm wearing. There's no going back. That's all about passion, right?
Yep.
And so the bottle really talks about that. Like you were saying, the color scheme, there's so much thought and so much passion that goes into every single little design of the product, from the production to the tasting to the package. It's all important. It's all important in that whole package.
I remember what got me into whiskey in general, because I do enjoy Scotch as well as bourbon. But I do remember that point in my life when I tried it and I got into it. Tell us your story, Adam, a little bit. Like, how did you, because you said you've loved whiskey or bourbon as long as you can remember, but do you remember what made you fall in love with it?
Yeah. So it was the first time I toured a distillery. It really was. So I was still working. So the very first job I ever had when I was 16 years old was Kroger, right? Kroger grocery. And, I was like a checker and a bagger and all that. And went through college and kept the job and came back from college, still had the same job, and opened up the very first wine and spirits store that Kroger did, kind of outward. I grew up, honestly, in the east end of Louisville. And so I really got into wine, really loved wine. And then, I'm like, I'm in Kentucky. And I remember I had drank bourbon before, like through college, but I never really paid attention to it. And so me and my brother went to Maker's Mark. And I fell in love with the distillery. It was beautiful. And if you've ever been to Maker's, it's just gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I remember the smell of the mash, the first time I smelled that. And it's just, I could, every time I smell mash, it takes me back to that moment with my brother walking into that room and smelling that heady beer and banana bread smell, and just thinking, this is something special in here. And then I was a Maker's Mark guy for a long time. I mean, and I still love Maker's Mark. I'm a sucker for the bottle. I think the bottle's beautiful. I went to the University of Kentucky, so I've got a lot of UK bottles at home as well. But I love the bourbon there as well. And that was really kind of my first introduction to, drinking bourbon, not just drinking it like, just need something to drink, but like really experiencing bourbon was that. And I think the thing that makes it really special to me is that I did it with somebody that I love, right, with my brother. And that has always stuck with me when it comes to whiskey, because, I mean, you can drink whiskey alone. I don't recommend it. Drink it with those that you love. Share it with those that you love, right? And so I'll never forget that time with my brother experiencing a distillery for the first time. And I think that really put me on the path of where I am now.
Rob, do you remember what made you fall in love with whiskey?
When I was I lived in Germany in high school, and so we would always, my dad was in the Army, so we would always go downtown off the military base, and I had my drinks back then in high school, but I really didn't fall in love with whiskey, I think, until maybe a couple months before we started this channel. I knew a lot about it. I didn't know like the detail, like in-depth stuff, but I knew a lot of the different brands and all that. But Graham really helped me learn more before we started this channel. And then I ended up going to the Jack Daniel's distillery, kind of the same story as you with my wife. And before we got married, and that same smell, just it was so hot that day too. My goodness. But you remember that, and then that's when you truly, and you're right. I mean, you just fall in love with it, and you kind of learn everything about it, the in and outs. It's kind of like your true love. When you really have that good first date. And yeah, it's amazing.
On the first smell, right?
Yeah, exactly. What about you, Graham?
So I actually was into cigars first. And I'd always have either water or a beer with my cigars. And one of the guys that I would share a cigar with would always tell me, "Oh, you gotta try a bourbon or scotch to pair with it. It's a great pairing." I'm like, I've had bachelor parties where I drank too much and we were drinking hard liquor, and I tend to stay away from that. And I'm like, I'm not gonna go down that road again. But yeah, I started kind of just trying to introduce myself to whiskey, and it's obviously still, I think, an acquired taste, but you got to give it time and be patient with it, because once you kind of are able to identify some of those flavors, it really becomes rewarding and really enjoyable. And I do agree, it's something to do with friends, and share that with friends, and that's kind of how I got started, was just trying to pair it with a cigar. And then now it's like I have all these bottles and I like to try new things, but I also am a guy that fears change and likes to go with what I know. So I've got a lot of repeat bottles and stuff that I stick with. So Rabbit Hole's definitely become one of the staples in my bar. And yeah, that's pretty much how I got my start with whiskey. I've got it on my to-do list before I die to go to Scotland and to do the Islay tours where you can just walk to each one. I have it on my list to go to Kentucky with Rob and do the Bourbon Trail. That'd just be so cool, especially when it's like only like 6 or 7 hours away from us. Because Scotland seems so far away, but I can go and do the Bourbon Trail too. And it's like a day drive. So that's really cool. Rabbit Hole is definitely a stop. Wild Turkey, Buffalo Trace, Maker's Mark. I think all of those are really reputable distilleries that I'd love to visit. So, yeah.
I mean, hit them all. There's so many. I've been doing this for a while now, and I always tell people when it comes to the Bourbon Trail, you kind of have 3 main areas for the bigger distilleries. So you've got like the Bardstown area in Lawrenceburg, Bardstown and Loretto areas, so like Maker's Mark and Cavehill, things like that. 1792, and then you've got the Lawrenceburg, Lexington, Frankfurt side, so like Buffalo Trace, which isn't technically on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, but you can look it all in there.
Sure.
Wild Turkey is there as well, Woodford, and then you've got the Louisville area But kind of between those are a lot of smaller distilleries that are always worth checking out. You know, your Jeff the Creeds, your Fearless here in Louisville, which is really neat right down the street from us. You know, even all the way down, it's called Green River now. It was another name for a long time. Now it's Green River Distillery. It was kind of took back to their original distillery all the way out in eastern Kentucky. And so, you know, don't focus on just the big distilleries.
Right.
Hit as many as you can while you're here. It's really amazing. It's quite the trip.
Oh, for sure. Man.
So
Looking forward to it. Hopefully sooner than later with all this going on.
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So I have a background a little bit in photography, and I always remember working with different photographers and them letting me pick their brain and kind of sharing things. Not saying that distilleries share things with other distilleries, but do you guys look at each other as like hardcore competitors, or is it like this friendly kind of club we're in? Like, can you explain that a little bit? How does that work?
Yeah. We compete on the shelves, but not in the industry.
Sure.
You know, so Kave, our founder, he really loves talking about how when he entered, you know, the industry, he wasn't a bourbon distiller already. He didn't have, you know, generations of bourbon distilling in his family. He was a psychologist. For 27 years, he was a psychologist.
Wow.
And then he opened bourbon distilleries. So it's like not your normal route to being a bourbon distiller. And I think he half expected to do it and get a lot of pushback from people in the industry, and it was the exact opposite. He was welcomed with open arms. Not only just that, but also mentorship. I mean, you know, that's why we had no problem talking about other people, other distilleries, other people in the industry. People like Larry Eversole, Jimmy Russell, you know, Julian Van Winkle, all these people that really were mentors to Kave and showed him the logistics of opening a bourbon distillery. Not so much the creative side. I mean, Kave kind of figured that out on his own. You know, Cavehill, we'll get to that. I mean, that's a really unique Nashville thing he figured out on his own, and it all came from in here. But the logistics of doing it, you know, where do you get your still from? You know, what kind of yeast are you going to use? Where are you going to source your yeast? How are you going to lay out your distillery? I mean, those sorts of things. Where are you getting your barrels from?
That's cool.
You kind of need a little help, right? And so that really came down to that sort of camaraderie in the industry. I always like to say, what is good for, I always say Angel's Envy because I can see Angel's Envy from here. What is good for Angel's Envy is good for us. What is good for us is good for Angel's Envy, right? Or Michter's, or, you know, Fearless, or Jim Beam, or Nathan, right? It doesn't matter. Like, it's a real brotherhood, and not even just brotherhood anymore, just camaraderie between everybody. And that is a really unique thing. I think a lot of other industries, especially when you're talking about products and things you're trying to sell consumers, right? They can get really ugly, I think, within the industry. But it doesn't work that way with bourbon because there's this inherent passion in the industry, right? If you're not passionate about what you're making, you're probably not making a good product and you're not going to last very long. And so that passion sort of leans over into other areas too. I mean, if you ever walk into a distillery and they tell you they only drink their own stuff, they're lying to. We all drink each other's stuff, right? Because that would get boring if we didn't.
Right.
It really would. So that really, we really compete on the shelves, of course, because that's, you're always looking for more shelf space, trying to get your bottle in other people's hands. But when it comes to the industry, we're all friends. We all work together.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, Rob and Adam, we have some other questions, but I think we should start just kind of having a dram together because that's kind of what we're here for. So you guys want to start with the Cavehill?
Absolutely.
Like the way you think.
All right.
Absolutely. I will tell you there's something that I really like to do. It's really special to me. I feel like, you know, even before we kind of started recording, we got here, we talked to each other and learned a little bit about each other. And we've been emailing back and forth for a while, right? And I feel like you can learn a lot about somebody by, I don't know, asking where they went to high school or where they grew up, or, you know, are they a dog or a cat person, something like that. But you don't really know somebody until you have a drink with them. So before we really dive into this and get nerdy with the flavors, cheers, guys.
Cheers.
You know what? I got my rabbit hole. Let me get mine. All right, hold on. I got to pour mine.
You're good. You're fine. I caught you off guard.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Mm.
All right. So, Cavehill. Yeah, we're starting with Cavehill, right?
We are starting with Cavehill.
That's what I drank. So.
That's what I'm drinking too.
That's what I'm drinking. I had to double check. I was like, yeah.
Great minds. Yeah, this was the first bottle. So this was the first thing that Rabbit Hole produced. This was Cave's called the OG, the original bottle, right? I think that this bottle really tells the story of the genesis of Rabbit Hole. Because when you look at this bottle, I mean, first of all, we're very transparent. We put our mash bills directly on the labels.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, we would shout out Kelvin or Cooperage, because the barrels are as big of an ingredient as the grains, yeast, water. And so that was something that Cave really wanted to do. He wanted to be very transparent. I think when he, first started really exploring the idea of opening a bourbon distillery, the thing that drove him crazier than anything was that he'd go into a liquor store or a bar and he'd see, 30 bottles of bourbon on the shelf with 4 people making everything. And you can't tell where anything is coming from. You can't tell mash bills, you can tell proof and sometimes age, and that was about it.
Right.
So he never wanted to do that to anybody, right? He wanted to be really open and transparent with people. And so right off the bat on Cavehill, you can see on the label, this is 70% corn, and it's 30% malted grains, and it's a 4-grain bourbon, so that is 10% malted wheat, 10% malted barley, and 10% honey malted barley. That's a really good callback to his Scotch days. So, when he was living in Chicago before he met Heather, the girl from Kentucky, he was a big gin and Scotch drinker, didn't know a whole lot about bourbon. And she really, the girl from Louisville, turned him into a bourbon drinker. And so when he created Cavehill, he wanted to kind of pull that, over from his previous life. And so he said, let's do a lot of malt. Malt's the name of the game here. And like I kind of said earlier, he could have very easily just sourced a bunch of, high rye bourbon or weeded bourbon barrels or something like that and called it a day, but he didn't. He really, really went out on a limb. In fact, the name comes from a conversation he had with Heather where he said, honey, let's sell the practice, let's mortgage the house, let's open a bourbon distillery. And she said, this obsession of yours is going to lead the family down a rabbit hole, and then there's no going back. And so that's how we got the name.
That's
and
awesome.
That whole idea of there's no going back, right? And Cavehill really, I'm going to use a phrase. It's a very marketing phrase. It kind of makes like the hairs on my neck stand up sometimes when I say it, but it's really apt. It subverts expectations because you read this mash bill and you don't see rye anywhere on that mash bill, right? You see malted wheat and you think, oh, this is going to be a weeder, like Larceny or Maker's Mark or Van Winkle, any of that. And it doesn't act like a weeder because it's not a weeder. The malted wheat really just kind of helps with a little bit of the texture. Truly, the secondary or flavoring grain on this, it's the honey malt. And on the nose, right, it's just like honeycomb, green apple, maybe a little tea, lots of baking spices. This comes from the barrels, the types of barrels we use. We can kind of get into that in a little bit, but that really, you don't expect that, right? And when you taste this, that spice is just right on the fore palate. I mean, right in the front of the palate, that green fruit, the green apple and pear right in the mid palate, kind of up a little bit. And then the finish is just sweet, like vanilla custard, honeycomb, creme brulee even. It's a really, really unique mash bill, and it's a really unique flavor. And I think that's what really made us successful right off the bat, which just being so distinct.
Right. A little bit on the nose, too. I'm getting a little bit of, like, it's faint, but orange peel, and then it's weird how I say it, but like cereal or like a grain, like a almost like it feels like Life cereal without the cinnamon. But
yeah, absolutely.
Nice aromas. I mean,
it's
gentle.
Earthy note, right?
Right. Yeah.
That malt really delivers a lot of earthy notes. So that malt is going to give you some sweetness, it's going to give you some fruit, but it's also going to deliver quite a bit of earthy flavors. And it's all about balance, right? I always kind of do this like the seesaw, right? If you're going to start here, so let's say we're starting with spicy, you got to end sweet, so it balances out, right? But those sort of cereal grains, in sort of acidic flavors like orange peel or pear. They kind of help balance that sea salt. They're like the fulcrum of that sea salt, right?
Right.
And so it's all about balance in the flavor progression of the Cavehill.
Now, Rob, this is like your least favorite one out of the lineup, right?
No, this is my favorite. This is my favorite right here. So, yeah, I love it.
It's kind of delicate on the nose too. It's not overpowering, but it's very inviting. I like that.
Yeah, and for it to be 47.5%, I mean, it's not too like punch in the face, and that's what I like about it. I'm not huge on like the big punch in your face, where you like take a sip, and unless I'm like going really, really slow with it, and I'll take a sip here and there with like a steak or something. But to drink this on a regular basis, I think that's why I like it so much, and it's so sweet. There's just something about it, having the bottle next to you, the story behind it all. It's that's why it's up there, probably top 3 of my favorite bourbons that I've ever tried. So not to like, just try to butter up to you or anything here. But no,
the check is in the mail.
Thank you.
Unpaid sponsor. No, but I think the more you spend time with a whiskey, the more you really explore these flavors. Sometimes I'm watching a football game or something, and I'll just have a dram, and I don't really concentrate on it, and that's fine too. But when I'm sitting here like talking with you guys and just kind of like, I feel like I enjoy it more because I'm really digging into it and really just finding out more about the spirit. And it's kind of like cigars too. I feel like both are just works of art. It takes a lot of effort and thought and work to do this kind of stuff, and I really appreciate you guys for that. So awesome.
Yeah,
I love this stuff. So
it really, I'm just going to bring it right back again to that word, passion, right? It's passion, and I think kind of like hitting on something that you just said. Okay, if you're sitting back and you're focusing on something else, like you're watching a game, you're reading a book, you're eating a meal, or talking to somebody about something completely different, and you're just sipping on this on the side, well, it serves its purpose, right? It's inviting, it's relaxing, you're creating a bond with somebody, kind of like we did with our first drink. But then you get with a group of people that has that same passion about this, and you're starting to talk about it, you're starting to kind of nerd out with the people, and then you realize like how deep that rabbit hole goes. Like, not even trying to be funny or anything, like you really sort of learn more about not just the product and the other people, but learn about yourself too, and like what you like and how good your palate actually is. I think a lot of people sort of, put themselves down and be like, man, I hear you say like vanilla custard and clove and allspice, and I can't taste that. I mean, give it time and you will, and you get with the right people and the right circumstances, you will. You absolutely will, and everybody is capable of doing that.
Yeah, it's something that we've really had to work hard to distinguish the notes we're getting, and sometimes it is easier to look at what more people are getting, so that you can, it's not that you're just saying, well, yeah, I get that too, but I think when someone's like, I get this flavor out of it, you can kind of concentrate on that more, and you're like, oh yeah, like I do get that. Whereas if you kind of go in blind, it's almost a little overwhelming, and maybe you just, you're just like, I don't know, it just tastes like whiskey. So I don't know. That's just kind of a thought.
I think there's merits for both.
Yeah.
I mean, there's, I'd say if you really want to humble yourself, do a blind tasting your own stuff, right?
Done that. Yeah, your own
humbling experience ever. Right, that is like super humbling. But at the same time, going the other way, like researching something, so detailed, and trying to figure out everything about it, from the story to the mash bill to the yeast to the age, the barrel, stuff like that. You can then start to look for some of those things, right? I mean, I will tell you, somebody brought something up on Cavehill when I first started working at Rabbit Hole, and they kept saying double bubble, like that really hard bubble gum.
All right.
And I'll tell you, when I think about it, and then I try Cavehill, sometimes I can find it in there, like that pink fruit, like bubble gum thing is in there, and then I'm like, is it because they said that, and I'm trying to find it, or is it really there? It's probably a little bit of both, right? So I think there's merit on both sides of that.
So
You both are thinking about it now, right? You're thinking about
Not now.
all I can taste now is bubble gum.
There we go.
Man, it's so easy to drink. It's so sweet. I really love that.
And it's
Rob
so
said,
easy to kind
It's not
of.
aggressive, but that doesn't mean it's weak. It just means it's not gonna be aggressive. I don't know.
When it's so easy for me to like pick it out. Like if I'm blind tasting 10 different bourbons, I'll know this is be the only one I'm 100% sure on that this is Rabbit Hole. And I think that is such a good thing to be able to, and it might be because it's one of my favorites and I know that, but and I drink it a lot, but it's nice to be able to have something that's so different than the others. Not to put any other brand down or anything, but yeah, it's kind of like what I
We like to be distinct.
Yeah.
I mean, that's good to hear because that really is one of our core values here at Rabbit Hole is that idea of being distinct and having, innovation is and there's something here that we say a lot that production is repetitive, creation is personal. And when you put it that way, it's easy to be distinct. It's easy to stand out in the crowd if, once again, you have passion for what you're doing. You're not just producing something, you're creating something, and then it's always going to stand out.
Absolutely.
Are you one of those drinkers that will put some water in your whiskey as well, or do you just kind of drink it straight out of the bottle, or does it depend?
It depends. It not only on the whiskey, but me. Like, what kind of mood am I in? What time of day it is? Which day it is? I will say this: never let anybody tell you how to drink a damn whiskey. I tell people that all the time. If you want to put water in your whiskey, ice in it, you want to drink it neat, you want to drink from the bottle. But however you want to drink it, like if you want to drink it out of a champagne flute, like whatever, it's your bottle. You do it the way you want. So for Cavehill, I think Cavehill is pretty perfect neat. I will say that water does some really interesting things to Cavehill. It starts to bring out almost herby characteristics. Like there's like this licorice, mint, clove sort of thing. That part of your palate where things start to numb it a little bit. That'll happen when you have like ice or water to Cavehill, and that's kind of fun to do. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's a way to drink every bottle. I can't stand it. My least favorite thing in the bourbon world, especially, I don't know why it's just bourbon, but like whiskey, but it's been really focused on American whiskey and bourbon last few years, is this idea of a drain pour. Like if you buy a bottle and you don't like something, like you're going to pour it down the drain. Listen, I got a lot of friends that work in the industry. I know how hard it is to make this stuff. When I see people do that, boy, that drives me crazy. I'm like, my friend made that. Like, they sweated over that, right? But if you get a bottle and you don't like it right away, give it time. A lot of times it'll change, right? I can tell you, like, Beam products, and I'll say this, like, Beam products, I don't generally like Beam products right out of the bottle. I tend to, like, especially their higher proof stuff, like Booker's or Baker's, I will actually pour half the bottle into another empty bottle, put stoppers on it, and let it sit for like a couple of days before I even attempt to drink it, because the air turns those things into like peanut butter and caramel bombs to me. I think Old Forester, like all of Old Forester's line, pretty much from top to bottom, with a few exceptions here and there, like 1910, I kind of like neat, but I think Old Forester does great with cubes in just about everything. But some days I like it neat too. So it just kind of depends on the day for me and just kind of the mood I'm in and what I'm drinking.
Yeah, and a lot of the times, the more the bottle goes down, the more oxygen that's inside, so the more it's going to oxidize and change the flavor. So some people don't even want to do a review when they first open the bottle, because they want to drink a couple of glasses and then let the bottle sit and then do it. So yeah, it definitely does change as you go down. Do you believe in the whole a bottle is good for no more than like a year? Like, because then there's too much air that oxidizes it? Okay.
Generally, yes. And it's not that it's not good after a year. It does tend to start losing some of its pop, right? Some of that panache that it has, like when it's first opened, because there is oxygen at work. Now, it's sort of a direct ratio, or I guess an inverse ratio of how much is left in the bottle. Like the less that's left in the bottle, the more it's going to oxidize, and the quicker it's going to oxidize. And no one ever believes me. I don't really drink all that much. Like I'm a really slow drinker. It's
only when you're working.
Say when you're in this, yeah. I mean that's the thing is that like when you're in the industry, you tend to like drink slower than everybody else because I just think you know how valuable it is. And so I just had to drain pour something the other day that was it was an Angel's Envy cask strength that I bought in like 2000 and gosh, I don't even know, 2016. It was the year that they had the bottle they put out had like so much sediment in it, and I hadn't drank it in like several months, and I pulled it off my shelf. And I was like, I'll have some of this, and I looked at it, and it was like this much of the bottle. It was completely cloudy. It had gone bad in the bottle. So it can happen. So generally, yeah, I do think that most whiskeys will kind of lose their pop after it's been open for about a year. That being said, there are things that get better somehow. I actually had some Jim Beam products. Somebody came to the distilleries several months ago, and we did a tasting with them. And he was like, "Hey, come out to my car. I got some really neat bottles." And I was like, "All right." So I got to his car in the parking lot, and he had these old bottles of Jim Beam from the 50s. And one of them had been open for like, he was like, this thing's been open for like 8 or 9 years at this point. It smelled and tasted like grape Kool-Aid. It was crazy, like how concentrated it got. Like the plum and the raisin and the grape notes on it were just so strong. And so, I mean, I think you do have some things that, for whatever reason, do get better with age in bourbon, but that's kind of few and far between. I really do subscribe to the idea. After about a year, you start to lose some of the pop on it.
So how do you guys think the finish is on this one?
Man, the finish is, I feel like it's long lasting. It stays on your palate for quite some time, minutes for sure. And it has that same kind of blast, on your palate, that same, it doesn't fade, which I also like about it. It kind of sticks with you. I know a lot of people don't like the word smooth, but it's definitely a smooth finish. And I mean, long lasting for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I still have that grain finish with a little bit of honey, and then still some of that sweetness.
I get a lot of brown sugar too.
Yeah, maybe even a little bit of the oak. But more, for me, that grain / cereal is kind of what is really hitting me, and that's actually something that I really like in whiskey. So it's really pleasant. So yeah, really happy.
Yeah, it's like brown sugar, caramel apple. It's good.
Yeah, the finish for me, I think, is what kind of ties this up, because by the time you get to the finish of Cavehill, you've experienced spicy, you've experienced tangy, you've experienced like earthy, right, and even just like a little bitter on the edge to kind of keep it going and keep it alive. By the time you get to the end, that sort of sweet, overwhelming honey or vanilla, kind of custardy, creamy, smooth is okay, smooth, right? Yeah, I mean, it really sort of ties it together and balances all those flavors.
Well, Rob, you think this is still going to be your favorite?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
Definitely. Nothing wrong with that.
Have you guys finished yours? Because I have finished mine. I'm ready to go to Heigold.
I am. I'm ready. But what is your favorite in the line for both you guys?
Oh, man. You know what? You're probably gonna hate me when I say this. Right now, at this moment, it's the newest thing that we've released, which is this limited bottle, the Founders Collection. It's nuts. Man. It's so good. It's Boxer Grail, but it's cask strength, so it's 114.6 proof, I believe. 6 years old. Comes from 7 barrels. It is phenomenal. It is oily and creamy, leathery, with cherry and black tea, licorice.
Sounds good.
Mint. It's unbelievable. It's so good. Man.
Speaking of the age, you said 6 years. I was going to ask you later, but since we're on the topic, any more, maybe down the road, come out with something with like a 10-year, 12-year kind of age statement kind of deal, or any plans for that?
Yes and no. So when it comes to the core products, we'll just see what happens, really, because with these core products, so just talking Cavehill, Heigold, Boxer, Grail, Derringer, right, the four whiskeys, these things really kind of live in their own world, and we really, you know, Cave really didn't want age to be the most important thing with these, because when he first started, you know, you got thinking in the mid to late 2000s, that was everything. Is it old? Is it weeded? Like, you know, it's like that's what everybody wanted, and so, you know, it gets old. I mean, like I said, white noise. Who wants to be white noise, right? And so he started really thinking outside the box on how do you change this even more? You know, how do you stay traditional but also be innovative? And so, like, that's where Cavehill was born from, was that idea of use some like ideas that were like pre-prohibition ideas, where everything wasn't just wheat or rye as a secondary grain, but also, you know, what can you do in there that's going to be different, where it doesn't have to be 30 years old or whatever to be amazing. Because, I mean, I'll tell you, I've had 20-year-old bourbons that were chewing on oak branches. Yeah. I've had 2-year-old bourbons that just blew my socks off how good they were.
Right.
So I've really become a proponent of age really is just a number when it comes to whiskey. You know, that being said, our founders collection, right? So these founders releases that we're doing, we just released one, which was the Boxer Grail, our very first limited bottle. We will be releasing a second one in the spring. I think the age of that is going to be around 15 years. That bourbon is actually coming from Cave's personal stocks, like these barrels that he sort of accumulated in his career from other distilleries. And we're going to finish that. I think it's being finished in Mizunara oak. So that's really interesting. But like I said, I mean, we'll see where we go. I mean, generally, like Cavehill and Heigold, you know, on the bottle, on the label, it says at least 3 years old. Generally, these are like, you know, 3, 4, 5 years old in these bottles. Maybe that's the golden, you know, spot for these. You know, maybe they're going to get to like 7 or 8. Maybe they're not as good anymore, or maybe they're better. We just don't know until we do it. So you never know. I mean, Cavehill and Heigold, maybe the general age will just continue to grow. Maybe it'll hit a spot and it'll stop there. And then we'll maybe make another product out of something that's older. I mean, we're kind of keeping, you know, all that open right now. I think sometimes that frustrates people because they're like, he doesn't want to tell me the answer. It's like, well, we don't really know, right? I mean, we've been around for less than 10 years. We're still experimenting, right? And we don't want to do the same thing that everyone else does, where the only thing that you change is the age. We want to push the envelope and, you know, focus on different things like different mash bills, you know, keeping the batches really small, doing really interesting single barrel stuff that we're going to start next year, different finishes, really, really interesting barrel finishes. So, you know, for us, we're trying to push the envelope into corners where other people haven't really explored for whatever reason. And age just seems to be one of those things that I'm just getting tired of talking about age all the time, I guess, you know, because I feel like it really takes a backseat to so many other things that you can do.
Right.
Now, plus, you don't have control over age, right?
Right.
I mean, the barrel tells you when it's done.
Very true. Is Rabbit Hole available in you know, most part of the country now? Okay, because I remember when I first tried it was only like in 8 or 11 states or something like that. Yeah, so that's good to know.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about amazing timing? We launched nationally in March. Really amazing timing. A little bit of a hiccup there, but we have far outpaced ourselves. In fact, I think not just in Rabbit Hole, but the bourbon industry as a whole, September was like our biggest month ever in sales. I mean, the bourbon industry. So that's saying something about 2020. But yeah, we are available coast to coast. I think there's like a few spots here and there that we can't get into just because, you know, different state laws. But those are really, really few now.
Good.
Going back to the age statement just for a bit, while we want to pour the Heigold, I think too many people get caught up on the age, and I'm not gonna lie, I might be one of them every once in a while where it's like this mystique where the age is like oh my gosh, 18 years or 21 years. And you're just like, because it is cool to think that something has aged for 20 some years. Like I am,
Yeah.
when I was 10 years old, this was being put into a barrel and it sat there. Like that part's really cool. But I think it is a misconception to get to think that just because something has only aged for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, that it's not good or that it's immature and not worth the price tag. So I met a guy once too that he used to tell me that if it's not like for Scotch, if it's not a 12-year, it ain't worth getting. And I don't think that's true. And I don't think that's true for whiskey in general. Like maybe for some, but not for others. And I just think you don't want to get too hung up on that.
Well, maybe for some people too, and not for others, right? Because I know plenty of people that enjoy younger whiskey rather than enjoy older whiskey, and it's not because it's just what's available to them or anything. It's just what they like.
Right.
I mean, like I said, I've had older whiskeys that were great. I've had older whiskeys that weren't so great. I think people confuse quality and rarity.
Yeah.
Right. Just because something is rare doesn't always mean it's top quality. So you kind of have to learn that for yourself. But quality can be tricky too. I mean, just because maybe if someone says it's not quality bourbon or a quality product, for instance, any product at all you can think of, just because someone says it's not a quality product doesn't mean it's not quality to you. It's such a personal thing. Right, it is what you discover that you like. That's such a personal thing. But I am with you on like the history part of it, because you start thinking about scotches. You look at like what's the crazy one out there? It's like $100,000 usually. Like the Macallan, I think.
Macallan, yeah,
70 some odd year old, right? Man, you think about that, and you're like 70 years, like. What was going on 70 years ago? It was like World War II or whatever. You know what I mean?
So cool.
Like it's
like a time
really
machine.
Amazing to, yeah. And you start thinking about the people involved with that. So,
right.
A master distiller or a distillery owner or a whiskey maker in America, they've got a chance to create like 3 or 4 products sometimes that are like 15, 20, 25 years old. When you're like a master blender or distiller in Scotland or Ireland, sometimes your biggest, you're going to be able to produce one thing that's like 40 years old. That's 70-year-old Macallan. That's like 3 people that handled that distillery while they were doing that, right? So, the history behind that is where that really gets really neat to me too. I think that's really interesting to think about it in those terms.
I remember there was like a YouTube video of David Stewart from Balvenie. I think it was a 50-year, like. He put it in the barrel when he started, and then they took it out when he retired, and they were like sharing the dram, and I think the bottle sold for like I can't even tell you. It was at least, I don't know.
Can you imagine that room,
Yeah, I gotta have money, dude.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. But yeah, I think, for me, age is less about quality and taste and more just about like the history of it. I think it's really neat. Because one of my, you always talk about unicorns. Like one of my unicorns when I first really got into bourbon was Elijah Craig 18, because that was pre-fire Heaven Hill, and it was like that's never going to exist again. The Elijah Craig 18 now is very good, but it's not the same 18 year because it's not pre-fire, and so that literally will never exist again. And so whenever you see a pre-fire bottle of Elijah Craig 18. Something that that's history in a bottle, and I think that's the part that really gets me. I just think is so amazing.
And that makes me sad too when distilleries do that, where they move on from a brand that I really like. Like I have the Macallan 10 Fine Oak, and I won't open it because it's like I can't get the bottle anymore.
Yeah,
so I want to enjoy it, but it was one of my favorite, and it's so sad. But I get it. They come out with new things, and yeah, it's tough.
There's always more whiskey.
That's right.
There's always more whiskey. There's always more whiskey. And more people that'll help you drink it. Always more of them, too. All right, so we're going from the original bourbon to the newest bourbon that is in our line. Heigold is just about a year old. I think we released it a little bit over a year ago. It's really cool. So Heigold and Cavehill on paper look so similar because same age, general age statement's about the same barrel, same yeast, same ratio of grains, 70% corn and 30% malted grains. The malted grains change here, though. It is now 25% malted rye and 5% malted barley. And whereas Cavehill, really, that name and that brand really, it's paying homage to all the distillers that came before us. Heigold is about one person. It is about Christian Heigold, who came to Louisville in the 1850s from Germany. He was actually a stonemason. He carved the original courthouse steps in Jefferson County. There is a facade. It's a stone facade. It's called Heigold House. It's just the front of his house that's left standing about 1.5 miles from here. And the big thing with Christian was, like I said, he was a German immigrant. He came to Louisville at a time when there were these people called the Know-Nothings in power. We're just talking about history. This is really cool history here. It was a group of people that controlled the paper here in Louisville and were also very anti-immigrant. And so, Christian stood up to those people. He followed his passion, and he made this house for his family. And on the front of the house, he carved a bust of, I believe it's James Buchanan, who was the president at the time, and scenes of George Washington's life all around it. And it became this iconic symbol of this melting pot of not just Louisville, but the United States. And so I think that story really resonated with Cave and sort of his history, right? And so the malted grains that are in here, that malted rye, that is a German malted rye. We get that grain from Germany because we named this after a German immigrant. So Heigold really talks about, that idea of being, going for what you stand for, but also being different and being comfortable being different. So you can call this a high rye bourbon. In fact, I think we call it high rye on the label. It doesn't really act like a high rye, though. Whereas Cavehill, with no rye in it, has a big spicy punch to it. Heigold sort of sneaks that in on you. When you smell it, it's really soft and sweet. Like there's Werther's Original, tons of butterscotch. The toasted barrels that we use, I think, really show up in Heigold. So Kelvin Cooperage, which is 9 minutes from here in the south of Louisville, they are the Cooperage that we use. We love Kelvin because they toast and char every single barrel that they get to us. And so that means every single product that you get from Rabbit Hole comes out of a barrel that is toasted and charred. But not only do they do that, they do not do it over a gas flame. They actually build a wood fire underneath every single barrel, which is even cooler. I mean, if you all are grillers like I am,
yep.
I have a smoker and a grill at home. My smoker is propane because that's just easier. But my grill is charcoal because it tastes better. The meat just tastes smokier and deeper flavors, richer flavors. It's the same thing for our products. And Heigold, I think, really, really benefits from that because when you taste this, it's going to be the exact opposite of Cavehill. It's going to be very sweet up front, and then the spice is on the finish. And instead of being that kind of broad sort of baking spice that we were talking about with Cavehill, for me, it is most definitely cinnamon on the end. And it's that sort of idea of that simple, that you were just talking about, like how Cavehill isn't aggressive, but it has power. We call that like a power of elegance in the wine world. I think Heigold really shines in that. It seems so soft and so nuanced, but the more you drink it, the more you realize it is a powerhouse. It really, really is a powerhouse.
I was noticing too that I was getting the cinnamon and like gingerbread on the nose, and I gotta say, I think I like this nose better. What do you think, Rob?
I am getting a lot of butterscotch and cinnamon.
The Heigold is pretty crazy. When it's fermenting, it is a really crazy smell. That malted German rye, it does something really crazy in the second day. I mean, it is like kind of fruity, but also kind of funky. So when we're doing all Heigold in here, it's a really, really interesting smell in this distillery. I'm really into it. I'm really into it.
Well, cheers, guys.
Cheers. Thanks for being on with us.
Of course.
Awesome.
Of course. It's my pleasure. Man, I love
we can taste the rye and the spice, especially on the back end.
And I love when you do Cavehill and Heigold next to each other because it shows you this idea of like varietal in bourbon, which, you know, in the wine world, like you can go to a restaurant, you can order a steak and get a red wine, it's probably going to work. But if you go to a really nice restaurant and you order something, you're probably going to have somebody walk up that's a sommelier and say, hey, you ordered the shrimp scampi. I say you need, you know, a Northern Italian Pinot Grigio, or you ordered, you know, a ribeye. You probably want this really nice South American cab. Why can't you do that in the whiskey world? And I think this is a really good example that you can. Cavehill is really like the Cabernet for us. It goes great with really rich, deep, meaty meals. So think like pork barbecue sliders or pot roast, things like that. Whereas Heigold, it's a little bit more, it needs a little more nuance in food pairing. So I actually do like a great chicken chili. I actually deglaze my onions with Heigold, and that's really good. But also, you know, kind of like Cuban food is really great with Heigold because there's some fruitier notes that sort of bring out some of those, I don't know, citrusy notes that you find in the mid palate of Heigold.
It seems more rich than Cavehill.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I drank this today and I drank Cavehill tomorrow, I'd probably be like, yeah, they taste like bourbon. They taste kind of the same. But like you said, when you drink them next to each other, you really kind of notice the differences.
It's super fun to do, like right next to each other. It's a really interesting experiment, right?
It's really good. I've never divulged too much into rye whiskeys, but I think this being just a high rye, not a rye whiskey, it's definitely that really good balance, at least for me.
And this one, I think, kind of does the opposite of what Cavehill does. If you put water on this, it tends to get a little sweeter to me. I think some of the cinnamon comes out, but it's almost more like cinnamon candy, like a Red Hot or something. Like you get a little more spice, but I think the sweetness sort of develops more with water as well.
So I definitely get like vanilla and caramel on the finish.
Yeah.
Rob, has it won you over yet?
Oh, I like
it, but has it won you over as your favorite?
No. And nothing, no disrespect. But I don't know. I think Cavehill is more, I think it has a lot of nostalgia too from when we first tried it. What was it, 4 or 5 years ago? And just all the memories we have with it on our videos and just being able to pick it out and all of that. But it's definitely second best in my opinion. Now we've only had 3 of them, right, Graham?
Right.
We've had Cavehill, Heigold now, and then PX Sherry.
Yeah, which is now Derringer.
Yeah. Yep. And then you guys do have a rye as well, right? Okay.
We do. So rye is called Boxer Grail.
Okay.
And that is a 95.5 rye. And in fact, the rye grain there is different than Heigold's rye. That is actually Canadian rye. That is the most celebrated rye mash bill of all time, 95.5. And that one is really interesting too. It's a really interesting rye whiskey. It doesn't it really act the way that you expect the 95.5 rye to act. Really, really interesting bottle. I love the nose on this bottle.
It's really good. The nose,
well, I will say, I think I do like the nose better on this one.
It is really
good. So complex.
Yeah,
it is so complex.
It's like you go back to it, like, I've never had that before. Then you take a sip, then you smell it again. You're like, wow, I've never had that before.
How did that? Yeah,
it's almost like it's changing.
Stone fruit in Heigold is like this thing that sort of I always forget about in Heigold until I get like kind of deeper into the glass like that, and then it's like almost like peach and apricot start to show up in Heigold to me, which is just such a neat flavor to show up in a high rye bourbon.
Oh.
Remember too, Rob, when we were reviewing this, I said, you know, sometimes when you go a few days or a week without drinking any whiskey, like sometimes on the way down, it just really burns.
Yep.
And you got to have a couple swigs before you kind of get used to it again.
Right.
Like, but this doesn't do that. It's just so kind of inviting on the way down. It's really good.
Right. So what else do you guys have? I know, so the 4 that we mentioned, and then any other...
So we've got that Founders Collection.
Yep.
Our first Founders Collection was just released, so be on the lookout for that. It's phenomenal. We also have a gin. Guys, I'll tell you, I'm not a gin drinker, but our gin is really good. We actually finish a London dry gin in rye barrels, in our Boxer Grail barrels. It tastes like limoncello and Earl Grey tea. It is an 89 proof London dry gin that you can drink neat. Seriously, it's so good. We have a French wheated vodka that we sell here at the distillery called the Dell. And then we do, we've got so much stuff that we're working on right now. There was like a 5-grain chocolate malt mash that was in here for a while that whenever we're mashing that in here, it looks like Cocoa Puffs. We'll see what happens with that. There's all sorts of different barrels floating around this distillery right now. More than I can even name. Everything from cognacs and armagnacs to different types of oaks from different parts of the world that we're, kind of messing around with and finishing in. And so there is a lot on the horizon for us. But right now, everything that we have released are these 4 whiskeys, the Founders Collection, the gin, and the vodka. You as a cigar person, you were just saying you're a cigar smoker, so you gotta get started. We have some really good cigars that Diesel does for us called Whiskey Road. Those are awesome. One of them, the wrapper is aged in Cavehill barrels after we're done with them, and the other one, which is a darker wrap, that is actually aged in the Pedro Jimenez sherry casks. That is super good. It's really spicy. It's really good. I like that one a lot. I'm a dark wrap guy.
Okay.
Cigars, I like a really dark wrap.
Yeah, I think you guys sent us about, what did we get, about 5 of them a couple years ago from you guys, and we reviewed them, and they were good.
Are you still aging any of them?
Brand.
Graham, you have a couple left, don't you?
I don't know.
You don't?
We smoked some. We gave some to a couple of our close friends.
We did, yeah. That's right.
They age so nicely. Man. I've got a few left in my house that are from 2 years ago that I'm going to let go for another couple of years in my humidor and just see what happens. But they age really nicely. Those bourbon, like the barrel-aged cigars, they age so well. They age really, really nice.
I have some cigars in my humidor that I think I've had for like 4 years that I haven't even smoked yet. Like not that I'm just trying to age them, but I just haven't gone.
Just haven't got to them. Yeah. It's funny. Like whiskey, you can kind of rush it if you need to. Cigars, man, you just can't do it. You just can't do it. You don't have the time. You don't have the throat for it. Yeah.
That's what's terrible about living in Wisconsin too, is that as like.
You have like 4 months to smoke.
Yeah, during the winter, it's like I want to have one, and I've got the itch, but then I go outside in the 20-degree weather.
There, you smoke this much of it, and you're like, I'm good. The cigar just freezes in your hand.
We've done a couple videos where we've battled it out too, and we're like, it is pretty cold, but we're doing this.
At one point, you can't tell if it's smoke or if it's just like steam coming out of your mouth. Yeah.
Something I like that Rabbit Hole did on their website too is they have a bourbon on the brain, and it's basically like a bourbon 101, and it just talks about, what is bourbon, what is a Kentucky straight bourbon, what's a straight bourbon, single barrel, small batch. I think that's really cool information just to kind of share with anybody browsing on the page, anybody that's new to the hobby. So I read that today, and I just thought that was really cool. Kind of there were some things even that I wasn't either aware of or I forgot about. So really good information. Anybody out there that's watching, go to Rabbit Hole's website and just kind of browse around and find this page and kind of just brush up on some of these terms and definitions. It's really cool.
And I will say on the website right now, something that we're really pushing is this idea. We're in the holiday season, so we really like this idea of give the gift of bourbon. In fact, we've done the hashtag give the gift of bourbon. We're doing these really cool holiday tastings right now that are completely free. They're completely free. They're virtual holiday tastings and tours. We're doing them once a week, all the way through December. In fact, I got my first one tomorrow night I'm doing. And then I think even through like the first 2 weeks of January, we're going to keep doing them. And they're completely free. But the whole idea of that is, if you go out to a liquor store and you're going to buy a bottle of Rabbit Hole, buy 2 and give one away to a friend and invite them to this tasting that you can do together virtually. And it's going to be really fun. I'm just going to walk through the distillery, give a really in-depth tour, and then do a full tasting, our whole lineup. We'll do a full tasting.
And that's on your website? It
is, absolutely. Okay. In fact, you can go to rabbitholedistillery.com/Adam. Is one of the shortcuts that they gave me, or I think you can do like /private tasting, but yeah, it should take you holiday tasting. Should take you straight to that page. But it's a really cool way to kind of share with somebody that whole experience of like a distillery tour and a tasting.
Yeah, very cool.
Something that I read too that I wasn't aware of was straight bourbon. It says to be classified as a straight bourbon, it has to conform to all the guidelines for bourbons, be aged in the charred oak container for at least 2 years. If it is aged less than 4 years, an age statement must appear on the bottle. I didn't know that.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's a lot of times you might pick up a bottle of whiskey, and if it's less than 4 years, they'll do it like it's a kid, like it's a child. They state it in months, and so it'll be like 36 months old or whatever. Yeah. So, and that's not even just bourbon; that's whiskey too. So, like our rye whiskey, that is a Kentucky straight rye whiskey, because not only is it 2 years old, but it's in that charred oak container, virgin too. It can't be reused. To be straight, to be bourbon, right? I mean, to be bourbon, you can't reuse that container. But to be straight rye whiskey, you can't reuse that container either.
So because you guys can't use any bourbon barrels a second time, how much would shipping be on one of those bad boys? Get one over here.
Man, I hear you. Right? You know what? Those bourbon barrels, they get a long life. I mean, first of all, our rye whiskey barrels, I mean, we reuse those for the gin, of course. But our bourbon barrels, we send them right back to Kelvin. Gosh, all of the things that use bourbon barrels to age now, I mean, they have like lives of like 100 years old, basically, because cognac, rum, beer, cigar wraps, right? Leather, vanilla, maple syrup, Tabasco sauce. I mean, you keep going. I know Kelvin told me that one of their fastest growing importers a couple years ago internationally was the country of Israel, because they were starting to age all their kosher wines in bourbon barrels, and they would actually fill a truck up and then bring in a rabbi, and he would bless the barrels and make them kosher. I always thought that was so cool.
Awesome.
That was a really cool thing. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, everybody uses bourbon barrels with Scotch. I mean, so many Scotches use bourbon barrels to age now, right? So, I mean, those bourbon barrels, they have a really long life, so I never feel bad for them.
Does Rabbit Hole sell any of their barrels to any distilleries in Scotland, or do you pretty much find other uses for your barrels?
So we don't sell anything directly. We send them all back to Kelvin.
Okay.
We have done some local partnerships with some breweries where they've used our barrels to create some beers, but they've been really small, just like 2 barrels here, 2 barrels there, really limited release beers. But we haven't really done it to where we are like subsidizing them and sending them to specific places. We generally just sell them all back to Kelvin and let them sort of make that decision on where they want to send them.
Okay. What's the most expensive bottle you've ever tried of anything?
So the very first bottle I actually bought myself, and this is before that whole Maker's Mark thing we were talking about with my brother. The very first bottle I ever bought myself was actually a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle 23-year-old.
Somehow I knew it was going to be
It really
that.
was. It was.
Wow.
And it was like back when nobody was really buying bourbon still. And it was at the store I worked at, and it just sat in this cabinet, I mean, for like 3 years. And I was like, I'll throw the $250 down. Guys, I had no idea what I was doing. I don't remember anything about it.
Man.
Like, I might have mixed it with Sprite. Like, I don't even know. And I think that's like the most I've ever spent on it. I think that's the most I've ever spent on a bottle. Well, yeah, more or less. I typically don't spend $200 on bottles here and there. I mean, if I was allowed to buy a bottle of Founders, I would absolutely do it. It's usually I think it's about $195. But as an employee, I'm not allowed to buy one because we want to keep them out there for the consumers. If I was allowed to buy one, I absolutely would throw the $200 down on that. But generally, I feel like I'm happy with a $15 bottle. I'm happy with a $100 bottle. Like I'm an equal opportunity bourbon drinker. I love them all. It's very hard to give me a bottle I don't like. But yeah, I mean, I think that 23-year-old Van Winkle was the most expensive, and I paid $260 for it.
Well, yeah, I have a buddy that goes over to his wife's uncle's, and he used to own a a store, and he's got like all these Van Winkles, bottles, and every time he goes over there, he takes a picture and sends it to me. He's like, "Hey, look what I'm drinking." It's like, "Oh, must be nice."
I would say I kind of wish I held on to that bottle, because it was a 2005 green glass Lawrenceburg Pappy Van Winkle, and I mean, I'm not really big on the secondary market. I'm not really crazy about the secondary market, but that is like a few house payments. Yeah, it's crazy. But no, I mean, I do remember when I was drinking it, I was like, okay, it's really oaky. But I didn't know what I was doing back then. I had no idea.
Sure.
So the Founder you can find at like a Total Wine or pretty much anywhere? Okay.
It's incredibly limited. So there was only about 1,300 bottles total.
Wow.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I've actually only seen it out in the wild once. Yeah, I mean, where at?
I was just
Milwaukee
thinking,
area.
Yeah, Milwaukee area.
I don't know. It's a pretty big market.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big market. You might. I mean, we've started to kind of see some of these pictures that people are taking, trickle in. It was kind of a slow burn. I think we sort of introduced it kind of quietly. I mean, we didn't throw. I mean, we made a big to-do of it for us, but I think, by the time we had released it, other things were getting released in the industry too that sort of took some of our thunder. But it's starting to show up on these lists for World Whiskeys of the Year. These, some big reviewers are starting to really add it to their must-buy list, things like that. Wow. And it's really starting to move. I don't even know, once we open the distillery a year, 10 years from now, whenever we're back to normal, we can open up. I don't even know if we'll have any to sell at the distillery, because it's just been flying out distribution wise. So
well, that's good though.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're happy about it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Is it numbered on the bottle?
About it. Yeah.
Okay.
One is individually numbered. So I wish I had one with me. They ended up giving me a bottle. I had to plead for it. Because they gave me a little 50 ml, and I was like, are you serious? I nursed that thing for 6 weeks, and then I was like, well, it's gone. But, back when I was able to kind of bring people in the distillery and kind of record this thing in person, I was like, I really need some of this so I can share it with, YouTube channels and podcasts and Facebook Live people. So they finally expensed the bottle out to me, but they're like, this is it. You get the one. So I'm guarding it with my life.
Before we had kids, obviously, we would splurge on some bottles that were a little bit more expensive. Rob, you got the 21-year Belvany.
That.
Yeah.
But what would you say to, because this is kind of the comment I've seen, just kind of looking through the web, what would you say to people that are a little hesitant to try Rabbit Hole because they think the price point is just a little bit too high?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I get that. Because I think where that sentiment comes from is something we were talking about earlier, is that people still tend to be stuck in that idea of age is the only identifier for price, right? So if it's older, it's going to cost more. Well, there's more things to it now. First of all, I can't think of another bourbon out there that's made with high content of malted rye. If you can think of one, that'd be awesome. I don't know of one out there. So Heigold, you're never going to find that anywhere else.
Right.
Also, Cavehill, that's a 4-grain that has honey malt in it. I don't know anybody else doing that. On top of that, let's talk about toasted barrels. I'm going to pick on some of my friends. I love Michter's. But they put a toasted barrel bottle out there that's $300. Every single bottle that you get from Rabbit Hole comes out of a barrel that is toasted and charred over wood fires, and they're $50, $60, $70. So, I get it. And I think where that comes from, people goes, oh gosh, it says it's only 3 years old on the bottle. No, it says it's at least 3 years old. It is most definitely, in many cases, much older than that. But I think that idea that, age is the signifier of quality is still stuck in people's minds. That is changing slowly but surely. That is changing in the industry and in the consumer base as well. So I think that is starting to move away. And we'll see what happens. I get it. And I think that there's a bottle out there for everybody, but I do think that every single bottle of Rabbit Hole is so unique, not just against each other, but against the same bottle, the same label. I mean, we do 15 barrel batches or less. That is really small. I mean, that idea of small batch, which is not really a regulated term, right? It doesn't. I mean, small batch for Jim Beam is going to be different than small batch for Rabbit Hole.
Yeah, it could be 40.
Yeah, 40,000, right?
Yeah.
I mean, my God, that could be small batch for Jim Beam. But for us, 15 or less means that you can get a bottle of Heigold. You know, this bottle of Heigold that I'm drinking tonight, it's pretty heavy on the cinnamon on the end, like that sort of red hot candy you were talking about. But I had a bottle of Heigold the other day, and it was like super heavy on like black tea and brown sugar and that sort of malty, sort of sweet and earthy flavors. So because of those small batches, one bottle of Heigold might be different from the next bottle of Heigold, and that's not something that you get in every other bourbon unless it's a single barrel. Right. So you know that's what I say to people when they talk about the price and what makes them hesitant is. Try it out. If you don't like it, guess what? Give it as a gift.
Yeah.
Somebody out there is going to love that bottle, right? And try it a million different ways. I mean, that's the reason that we really settled on 95 proof is because 100 proof bottles make really great cocktails. 90 proof bottles are great for drinking neat. Let's split the difference and make a bottle that's good for both.
Right. Really good explanation.
Yeah.
I think it's all too just because Rabbit Hole is newer, so we have Angel's Envy, which is around the same price, but we know about Angel's Envy. You know, like it's been around. There's other bottles that are as expensive, but I think because Rabbit Hole is also a newer distillery, it's just going to take time for people to try it and to do what Rob did and like the bottle, and then just once they're buying a bottle and trying it, I think they're going to be hooked and really love the...
Well, and another thing too is I remember when we first reviewed the bottle, I think there was only one other review on there from the guys down in Texas. What are they called? You know who I'm talking about, right, Graham?
Yep. The Academy.
Yeah. Yep. And now I look it up. I look Rabbit Hole up on YouTube, and there's like 20, 30, 40 videos on Rabbit Hole, and I think that says a lot too, that it is getting around,
right?
And the sales are going up just because of the the name itself and finding it on the shelves and putting it out there. I think so. That's a good thing. I think so.
Well,
I mean, we
like
are
Adam
a
said too.
Product.
Yeah.
Like you said too, just getting to the nationwide industry too is going to help a lot too. I think.
Right. So is that the front there, the front entrance, or where were you?
Oh
at?
no, I'm at the top of the distillery right now.
Oh wow.
I'm at the very top of the distillery. This still behind me,
okay,
that is 46 feet and 8 inches tall.
Geez.
So I'm all the way at the top of it. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm all the way up here. There's this way is our cocktail bar, which is under some construction right now. I'd usually be doing this inside the cocktail bar, which has a really cool little backdrop of a bunch of bottles and stuff. But it's under construction right now. But yeah, so our bar is called Overlook, and it sits on top of the distillery. And it overlooks the atrium here where we do all the fermentation, like all the mash tanks are below me. When you do a tour here, you actually walk through all the mash tanks and kind of over top of the mash tanks to get really close to the still. But, you know, we call it Overlook because not only does it overlook that, it's all glass around that bar too.
Yeah.
And it overlooks the city of Louisville because we're so high up.
Yeah, the building is beautiful. I mean, I've only seen pictures, but man, very beautiful.
We'll get there, Rob. We'll get there.
We'll get there. Absolutely.
I mean, join one of these holiday tastings that we're going to do, coming up. I mean, like I said, they're free. Like, you can just jump on, and I'm just going to walk through the entire distillery and show it off.
Nice.
And it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. And I think there is even a 360 tour on YouTube. I mean, if you type in Rabbit Hole Distillery 360-degree tour, it's one of those videos where you can, like, drag your mouse. And we use a 360 camera for it, and it's like
cool.
Goes all the way through the distillery. Really, really neat.
Is that a Rabbit Hole vest that you're wearing there, Adam?
Yeah.
Oh, very
limited edition.
So do you guys?
This was actually a Christmas gift last year from Cavehill.
Oh, nice.
Okay. Yeah.
You guys have a cool
really
gift shop there that you can buy like apparel and stuff like that.
We do, absolutely. We've kind of refurbished that too. We took the time that we were closed to sort of, go ahead and take the opportunity to kind of reconstruct certain parts of our distillery, like refurbish part of the bar up here and the retail space, and then kind of reassess our inventory and see if there was new things that we wanted to bring in. Because like right now, when you come to the distillery, I mean, you can't even come in the distillery. We do curbside delivery, but just on our products, not even apparel. Like we're not even selling our apparel online or anything right now. So yeah, but I would imagine that would change in the beginning of next year. We're getting really close to kind of relaunching our online store. There's some really, really cool stuff. This is also a limited edition. I love this hat. I basically stole it. I did. I was like, "Can I have that?" And they were like, "It's a thanks." Yeah, what are they gonna do?
All right. Well, before we get you out of here, Adam, I want to know what from both of you guys, between the two, which one did you enjoy more tonight? You can enjoy both, but which one did you enjoy more?
Actually, I mean, Cavehill is my favorite, but I actually think I enjoyed tonight the Heigold more. I've learned a lot more about it from you, and knowing the history that, you know, it's basically from Germany, if you think about it, and you know, living in Germany for a little while and knowing that is, you know, it's I've enjoyed learning. So and you know, getting different flavors this time. I've only had it the one other time before when we reviewed it. And just getting the different, you know, palette now, and kind of getting deeper into it. And then, like you said, each bottle's kind of different in a sense, and yeah, brought out a lot of different flavors. So I think Heigold I enjoyed the most tonight.
I'll say I'm actually the opposite tonight. So I generally gravitate more to Heigold when I put these two together. I mean, Cavehill is great, but I generally gravitate more to Heigold, but tonight I enjoyed Cavehill more for whatever reason. Just the way my flavor, my palate was. I really got into the complexity of Cavehill tonight. I love that baking spice and green apple on there. I was really digging that.
That's awesome.
What about you, Graham?
I'm gonna go with Heigold. I really love the nose on it and the palate. I loved kind of getting that gingerbread, cinnamon, rye flavor from it, and it just kind of reached it just reached out to me a little bit more tonight. But we've been so infatuated with Rabbit Hole that I think Adam just kind of found us and was like, hey, let's get together. So if you guys haven't tried Rabbit Hole out there, definitely, you know, spend the money, give it a try. If you don't like it, you don't have to buy it again, but I don't think you're going to be disappointed. So
no. This
was a lot of fun. Adam, thank you for taking the time to hang out with us tonight, because I know you are busy, and it sounds like, I know when we planned this a few months ago, like, yeah, let's get something on the calendar. And it was like 2 months later, I'm like, man, this guy's busy.
it happens. My calendar fills up pretty quick, but I mean, this is a really fun part of my job. I mean, I don't really have a part of my job that isn't fun, honestly. But I really do love just meeting people and having a drink with them and just talking about bourbon. I love talking about Rabbit Hole. I am a Rabbit Hole brand ambassador, but more than that, I'm an ambassador for American whiskey and Kentucky bourbon. So any reason that I have, you know, any excuse that I have to sit down for a couple hours to talk bourbon, I'm probably going to do it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I hope we can do it again at some point. You know, maybe we can try. We have not tried Derringer yet, so maybe down the road that's something we could get together and could kind of educate us on that as well. If we're open up and you all are in town doing the Bourbon Trail, just stop on by and we'll do stuff in person. Record a little thing here.
Yeah, if I can find a bottle of the Founders limited series, I'll bring it when we come.
You got it. I love it.
Not at your house. I'll sleep on your living room floor.
Yeah, my wife might kick me out. But... Oh man.
All right, guys. Well, this was a hangout with Adam Edwards from Rabbit Hole, trying the Cavehill and the Heigold from Rabbit Hole. Very good stuff. Until next time, guys, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Cheers.
Cheers.